Assalamualaikum dan selamat pagi Prof. Terima kasih.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Nama saya Nur Afika Kaisar binti Muhammad Ataluddin, pelajar daripada Bachelor in Medical Imaging. Terima kasih kerana sudi untuk bersama-sama kami untuk webinar pada pagi ini. Jadi Prof boleh saya bagi ke Prof untuk mulakan kita punya webinar pada pagi ini.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Sister Nur Asifa, our moderator for this session this morning. And I welcome all students, officers, and participants of the sexual harassment webinar this morning from Islamic law perspective. So thank you KPJ Healthcare University for inviting me to this session. I was quite worried about this session this morning actually because right few days before today I have massive commitment that I have to commit to for my work in the university. However, since I have made an agreement to appear this morning for KPJ Healthcare University for this topic, so I hope that I can share something from the Islamic perspective of sexual harassment. Okay, so I think the session will last at 11 o'clock this morning. Yeah, so maybe if we can make it earlier, so it will be open for Q&A session if possible. Okay, so let us see the second slide. Our topic this morning is sexual harassment from Islamic law perspective. I think this is part of the current government's commitment to distribute or to disseminate the idea of understanding what is sexual harassment and how it is considered as a wrong conduct from law and Islam and also from our local and cultural context. But maybe normally we do not understand what kind and example of sexual harassment really. Yeah, so until we may understand this morning. So can we move to the second slide, please? Thank you. Right, so harassment consists of offensive, abusive, belittling, humiliating, threatening, or intimidating behavior directed at a person or a group of persons. So this is the element of harassment. It's not necessarily sexual because we do not have the word sexual here. This is only harassment in general. Yeah. So to understand physical harassment, to understand emotional harassment, this is the main understanding of what harassment is. It must be offensive, maybe abusive, belittling, humiliating, or intimidating behavior directed to whom? To a person. It must be directed to a human being, or maybe more than one person as a group of person. And sexual harassment is often perceived as deviant behavior because it forces a person to engage in a social relationship or establishes someone as an object of attention that is not desired. There is no consent of both parties to get involved in that harassment. If there is consent, it will have no concrete issues of harassment because both consented. Now, the situation here is that it is directed to a person or to a group of person as a deviant behavior. Okay, and the element of forces, as you can see here from the slide, the definition of harassment, it must have the element of forces a person to engage in a sexual relationship that, of course, when you are forced to engage, you have no intention to engage, but you are forced to. So this is the situation of harassment that we have to differentiate between consented sexual misconduct. Yeah, and sexual harassment particularly is on the conduct which is imposed on and is unsolicited or unreciprocated by the recipient. So, of course, it is sexual conduct when we want to understand what is sexual harassment. Harassment in general is not necessarily related to sexual conduct, but when we mention the word sexual harassment, it must be related to sexual conduct. Yeah, imposed on a person unsolicited or unreciprocated by the recipient. Okay, which is of course unconsented by the recipient. So, for example, it may happen in our workplaces, it may happen in even our lecture hall, it may happen in the student activities. When we have student activities, it might happen with intention, without intention, and in general, it can happen to everyone. So, for example, the wrong conduct of sexual harassment is a repeated unwelcome sexual comments or sexual remarks. As simple as people say to you, you look beautiful this morning. It could be sexual comments. Yeah. You look stunning this morning. It could also be sexual remarks. So it's depend on the situation somehow. When the person make that remarks, whether he or she has the intention to further elaborate the situation at that time. So maybe when you see someone beautiful, stunning, handsome, for example, the following conduct is you are approaching one another. Yeah. And then if you conducted something beyond consent, then you are starting what we call as sexual harassment. As I said earlier, if both parties consented, it is not a sexual harassment. And look or physical contact, your unwelcome sexual remarks or comments, or unwelcome sexual looks, or unwelcome physical contact. Right, as I said, it could be by verbal comment and remark. It could be by only looks. Yeah, you see nothing. You just omit. You just say nothing. But from the look, you are inviting people to a situation where the victim feel harassed sexually. Or physical contact, then this is quite clear. Physical contact, normally what is understood by public at large. When you have physical contact with someone or a group of people and you force her or she or them to submit him or themselves to you by force sexually, then it will be physical contact, but it's not necessarily by physical contact. And among others, which are usually committed by male against female, or sometimes it could be vice versa. Okay, so when it is committed by male against female, because we understand that women have been historically disadvantaged by culture, by social life, by formalities, by procedure, by the system, sometimes by the law, women has been historically disadvantaged, including because women always be a victim rather than a wrongdoer in a sexual misconduct. So it could be anyway sexual harassment committed by girl against boy or by female against male. So when we understand what is really meant by harassment, by sexual harassment, so we can limit our social ethics, yeah, and nature. We can limit our social networking physically or otherwise, because we know that according to the definition of harassment, this is the limitation. If you go beyond this, then it will be a harassment, even though you never know that it is a harassment sexually. Okay, so how it happens, the conduct of the accused must be unwanted or unwelcomed. Okay, that is the key. If the conduct is welcomed, is what the victim wants, so she or he is not a victim really, because both consented to the wrong conduct of sexual attachment. The recipient must perceive the conduct as placing a condition of a sexual nature, and further, it must be offensive or humiliating or a threat to his or her well-being. So this is the how answer. Okay, unwanted, unwelcome sexual conduct. And the recipient or could be the victim much perceived the conduct as placing a condition of a sexual nature. So that's why we define it as sexual harassment. If it is not of sexual nature, it is not sexual harassment. It could be harassment. Yeah. And further, it must be offensive or humiliating or a threat to his or her well-being. So by understanding the definition, I think it's good enough for us to go to the next slide to understand how Islam perceived sexual harassment and also what are the context and concept in Islamic law. So judges from Islamic law have strictly regulated the way people maintain the body as stipulated in Surah An-Nur verse number 13. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا يَصْنَعُونَ. The definition is there, you can see. Tell unto men of faith that they keep their sight, jaga pandangan mata, and keep their genitals, jaga kehormatan diri, such is most sacred to them, which is if you keep it properly, it is better for you. Truly, Allah knows what they do. Okay, so this is the limitation of our social networking and social life, socialization. We can, of course, communicate between men and women. We can also work together. We can have our own discussion group together. We can study together. We can have our lunch together. But this is the limitation. What is the limitation? As stated in Surah An-Nur, verse number 30, keep your eyes. You have the limitation. You have the eyes. It's not necessarily means that you can see everything in front of you or at your back, your left and your right side. Even though you see something which is you think you cannot see, but you can see it because it is just in front of you, you have to keep your eyes properly. Because we cannot, limit other people's expression about what they want to wear, what they want to do. So because of that limitation, what we can do is that to limit ourselves. That is within our control. So if things that you can see, you think you cannot see, then you don't. Yeah, do not see. Keep your eyes and keep your genitals. This is another issue. When because you have sexual desire. Human beings have sexual desire. It does not necessarily means you can benefit from it without limitation. So that is why we have to understand why Muslim must found a marital relationship, mesti berkahwin, because of sexual desire is part of it. Yeah, so that is what we can do freely, but the limitation is that you can express your sexual desire within the relationship that is allowed by Allah, which is marriage. Other than that, you cannot proceed. So this is what Allah says, remind us in Surah An-Nur verse number 30. And of course, Allah knows everything that you will do. Yeah. So normally, this sexual harassment may happen in a private sphere, it's not in the public places. Of course. Yeah. So why? Because the wrongdoer want to ensure that nobody see what you want to do. Only the victim. Yeah. Only the recipient. So in that sense, he or she must remember that even though public cannot see, people cannot see, but Allah still can see. And Surah Al-Isra was number 32 also explains, and do not approach adultery. You always, I think, heard this verses of Surah Al-Isra, verse number 32, La taqrabu zina. Ya, innahu kana fahishatan wa sa'a sabila. Pernah dengar kan? Okay, this is what Allah reminds us. Do not approach adultery. It is a despicable act and a bad way, because the impact is not only a dignity, but the impact is your whole life that maybe you cannot see, you cannot understand by now when you are committing adultery, but you understand it later on. And I do have a large number of fellow colleagues, friends, people that I know who came to me and then shared their experience of, having illegitimate child, for example, and the impact was the whole life of the family and of the child himself or herself. So that is what I said, because of adultery that committed by both parties, it ends up the whole life complicated. Okay, so I just want to remind all of us here that do not approach adultery, whether you are under forced or you are freely or willingly want to do it. Yeah. So in our context today, sexual harassment has nothing to do with consent, because it is not consented, unwelcome, yeah, unconsented. But we have to be careful, because our act, our react, our expression of attire, for example, our look sometimes may invite this unwelcome comment, unwelcome act by our opposite sex. So be careful with that. Then we move to the next one. All right. Have you heard maqasid Shariah before this? Yes, the word maqasid Shariah from Arabic words, which means the objective of rulings. Yeah, Sharia is of course rulings based on hukum syara, and maqasid is the plural for the word maksud. Maksud in Arabic. In Bahasa Melayu it become maksud, and maksud is something that we intended to tell, yeah, intended to do, or the aim and objective of our action. So maqasid Shariah is, in Islam, everything that we do, we want to achieve 5 important objectives. Yeah. So we have to understand from Islamic point of view how this maqasid Shariah and its relation to sexual harassment. So the 5 categories of important or the objective and aim of ruling in Islam is protection against ad-din. We want to protect the religion of Islam. Number 2, I make it chronologically. So we have to prioritize number 1, religion. Then number 2, we want to protect life. Number 3, we want to protect our mind. Number 4, we want to protect our nasab or offspring. And number 5, we want to protect our property. So this is the objective of Sharia ruling. Without these 5 objectives that we want to protect and achieve its understanding, it is difficult to convince human beings that you have to do this because this is good for your religion. You have to do this because it is good for your life. You have to do this because it is good to your mind, to your nasab keturunan, to your property. Yeah, because human beings is always want to come with logic, even though in Islam somehow we cannot find the logic, but we have to submit ourselves to Allah because we are Khalifah of Allah. Okay, sometimes we have questions that we have no answer until now. but it is okay because only Allah knows, and then we just follow it. Yeah, we have to submit ourselves to our Creator. So, how Maqasid Sharia relates to sexual harassment, wrongdoings, or misconduct? So, we have um, to avoid sexual harassment because, of course, we want to protect religion. Islam teaches us not to do this. So we have to avoid ourselves, to prohibit ourselves from doing that. Because why? Because we want to be a good Muslim. We want to protect religion. We don't want to hear that people say, oh yeah, sexual harassment normally committed by Muslim because maybe their religion allow it. You know, we don't want to hear that. Then we don't want to be, uh, you know, um, duta, an ambassador for um, for what? For giving a misinterpretation of Islam to the outsiders. Yeah. So what we have to do is do what Allah allow us to do, and then avoid what Allah prohibit us to do. So again, Maqasid Sharia of sexual harassment is to protect religion. Number two is to protect our offspring, yeah, our nasab keturunan. Because from the sexual harassment, it may lead to rape. Yeah, it may lead to rape, and from there, maybe the recipient or the victim get pregnant, and then of course, when she get pregnant, hopefully she may deliver the baby safely, yeah, sehat, and what happened really to the babies when she or he grow up, okay, without biological father, without a wali in the family, and then without a guidance, without a protector, and maybe without even the mother, because the mother just, um, ignore her, ignore him. Why? Because he or she was born uh, involuntarily. There are situations, I believe that you also read somewhere, you understand about this, so it is not easy actually to have and to face this situation, but we understand that the babies are innocent, but they have to carry the whole life the name of illegitimate child. Okay, and even people may know that he or she is illegitimate without he or she telling them how. As for example, according to our law, um, you cannot use the word bin or binti for illegitimate child. Yeah, so if the name is uh, for example, yeah, Fatimah, Fatimah Abdul Ghaffar, tak boleh letak binti Abdul Ghaffar. Okay, tak boleh. So can we use Abdul Ghaffar? Can or cannot? The name of the father, because she has no biological father which is, valid and recognized by the law. Anak luar nikah hanya mempunyai ibu sahaja, dari segi nasab tidak ada bapa. Okay, so who is Abdul Ghaffar then? Yeah, so now the choices is, kalau dulu-dulu they can use Abdullah as the name of the father in the formal status in the identification card, yes. But now the choices is not Abdullah, but can use 99 names of Allah, which is started by Abdul. Abdul Ghaffar, Abdul Hakim, for example. Yeah. So, still cannot use bin or binti. So the hardship faced by this, what you call children, is that uh, I'm telling you it is difficult. So what we have to understand now is that we have to protect ourselves from, being trapped in this situation, whether willingly or unwillingly. And types of criminal conduct in Islam is, of course, sexual harassment is a criminal conduct. In kind of trespass against person, pencerobohan terhadap manusia, tubuh badan manusia. Yeah, it could be trespass against property as well. It could be trespass against offspring and dignity. So we do not want to talk about dignity. Because we know when you are a recipient, you're being forced to maybe illegal sexual intercourse because of the sexual harassment, get pregnant, deliver baby, and then, we don't talk about dignity at this point because what we are facing is even major and difficult than dignity. Okay, so we have to understand as well ethics to avoid sexual harassment. What are the ethics to avoid sexual harassment? Of course, we already understand that we have to keep our eyes, keep genitals, and then, be careful with um, situations where we can foresee that everything is not correct, everything is not fine. So we have to, reserve ourselves in certain situations, especially in a situation where we are or our life involves a number of person daily that we sometimes cannot avoid from um, social misconduct. Okay, next one is Malaysian law. Maybe we want to understand the reality, because when we talk about Islamic law on sexual harassment, in reality, the misconduct of sexual harassment is not governed by Islamic law in Malaysia, yeah, but it is governed by civil law. So next slide is on the Malaysian law. Until 2022, it has not been specifically stated in any provisions in Malaysian law, and the word harassment or sexual harassment itself is not been defined clearly by any statute. Yeah, but recently, the long-awaited Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022 was passed in the Dewan Rakyat in July 2022 and gazetted in October 2022. So this is important for, of course, victims, and happy, of course, to have this Anti-Sexual Harassment Act with the hope that it will reduce the cases, especially in the workplaces. Yeah, among others, the Act provides rights of redress for any person who has been sexually harassed. At least the victim will get compensation. And at least those who commit the misconduct, the wrongdoing, will be punished. Yeah. And because of the establishment of the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022, a tribunal for anti-sexual harassment to hear complaints on sexual harassment, raise awareness, and prevent the occurrence of sexual harassment can be done. So it's good to have very recently in October 2022, it was gazetted, and it's good anyway for KPG Healthcare University to have these kind of slots to disseminate the information to students, to staff, that it is now being legally binding upon all of us in this country. We cannot do this. If we do this, this is the punishment, and this is the compensation or remedy for the victim. And provision of the Act have been enforcing in stages until now, starting from March 2023. So it's good to see. And for a majority of you, maybe from what? From sciences program? Yes, from sciences program, this is very unfamiliar to you, maybe something about provision of law, and you are not, enjoy listening to this because it's quite awkward. No, so anyway, it's good to know. I mean, for law, ignorance is not a defense. Yeah, it's applicable to all citizens, to all human beings. So that is why it is important for you to know and to understand this. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Right, so we have our Kanun Keseksaan, or we call it Penal Code in this country. This is one of the main law, main statute in Malaysia addressing criminal conduct. So as I told you, before 2022, there is no Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. So any misconduct sexually is not clearly governed by any law in this country. So you just imagine from 1957 until 2022, we do not have such Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. So how we have been dealing with this conduct? Buat gangguan seksual lepas tu lepas saja sebab tak ada undang-undang. Not necessarily. We do have our kanun keseksaan or penal code which govern criminal misconduct, but again it is not very specific to sexual harassment. It's very general. So we can see from section 354 of the penal code, which says molestation, pencabulan, yeah, or assault or use of criminal force on a person with intent to outrage her modesty. So this is what you call, the word used in the penal code is molestation and it's not harassment. Yeah. But it could be within the definition of harassment because pencabulan is part of gangguan, yeah. So by using a criminal force on a person with the intention to outrage her modesty, nak bagi dia what? Dia tidak senang dengan keamanan hidup dia. Okay, of course now we are, feel good, no one disturb us, no one molest us, so we are good, so we are in modesty. But someone came in and then intend to outrage, buat kita marah. So this act, which is kind of criminal force, is a molestation, and the punishment is imprisonment maximum for 10 years or fine, denda, or whipping, sebatan, or any two of such punishment. Yeah, so it's very clear, if you do this is the punishment for you. It could be one of them or it could be both, either two. So the issue is whether there is any report made to the authority about the molestation. If there is no report from the recipient or from the victim, so this kind of wrong conduct will just continue in our daily life. People cannot see. This is very important for us to eliminate, because people just can accept it as a normalization. Everything that is just happened in the world, it's not awkward at all. A man coming to a woman and then physical touch here and there, we just okay with it. So we just make it normal in our life, even though it is a kind of molestation according to the law and according to Islam. All right, then 353 from the Penal Code stress on the assault or use of criminal force with intention to dishonor a person otherwise than a grave provocation. So assault is ancaman, yeah, or use of criminal force with intention to dishonor a person, untuk menjatuhkan maruah seseorang. This is very subjective. Yeah, to dishonor a person is depend on how the recipient express it, how recipient feel it. Sometimes because of the normalization, recipient just okay being assaulted by a man. Yeah, just okay, because why? It's not only me, but other person also being assaulted, so it is just common. Well, when you understand what is assault, what is harassment, you may lodge a report to the authority that this kind of things happen to me in this place and I want action to be taken, for example. Yeah. So in that sense, the punishment is imprisonment, penjara for maximum 2 years or fine or both. Penjara 2 tahun atau denda ataupun boleh kedua-duanya sekali. It depends on how serious the case is to be decided by the judge. And then Section 377D, outrages on decency, and the imprisonment is maximum for 2 years. Yeah, so this is kind of example of how outrageous, abnormal emotional expression bila marah. Okay, outrageous on decency. The punishment is still there for 2 years. And then 509, word or gesture intended to insult the modesty of any person, and imprisonment is maximum 5 years or fine or both. Even though a gesture intended to insult kesopanan seorang manusia. Ya, orang yang sopan tetapi ada satu isyarat-isyarat atau signal-signal yang ditunjuk oleh orang lain kepada orang yang sopan tadi adalah satu harassment. Why we stress on the modesty of any person? Sebab orang yang innocent, do nothing but being insulted by someone else, even though by word or by gesture, that is criminal misconduct. Yeah. So next page. Okay. Even though it has been a silent until 2022 on the definition of sexual harassment. However, we do have in Employment Act 1955 a definition to sexual harassment in workplace only. Yeah, in workplace only. It might be extended to a general situation anyway, but since this is governed by Employment Act and it must happen in the workplace, so the application of sexual harassment here is not extended to all situations. So according to Section 2, a definition to sexual harassment is any unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, whether verbal or non-verbal, visual, gestural, or physical, directed at a person which is offensive or humiliating or is a threat to his well-being arising out of and in the course of his employment. And this is only limited to workplace sexual harassment. So that's why I said we do have this kind of definition, but it is limited to workplace sexual harassment. Maybe the intention of the drafters of this act before this was to protect women in the workplace, to empower women to access into public life, but is protected their dignity. Yeah. However, we do agree that harassment is not necessarily happen in the workplace. Maybe it is even more serious in other than workplaces. Yeah. So in that sense, we need such a definition generally. So that is why recently we have the Anti-Sexual Harassment Act 2022. So now, a definition to sexual harassment is unwanted conduct of sexual nature. So again, they use the word unwanted because it is not a consent by victim. Yeah, of a sexual nature. It must be sexual nature, whether verbal or it could be non-verbal. Then how do we know that it is a harassment without verbal statement? Yeah, so it could be by isyarat-isyarat ataupun by look. The way people look at you, it may also develop the element of sexual harassment. Visual, maybe someone share with you. Well, in our life nowadays, even this definition I think is not wide enough, because visually we can use the social media. We can have the online communication even more than offline communication. So this kind of visual sharing of something sexually harass you, the videos, maybe sometimes people share with you in the WhatsApp or other private message or something like that, a video which really harass you sexually. So how will you lodge a report whether this online communication also included in the Employment Act 1955 Section 2 definition of sexual harassment? Because from this definition, unwanted conduct of a sexual nature, whether verbal, non-verbal, visual, gestural or physical, tak sebut online or must be only offline or can be both, directed at a person which is offensive or humiliating. So, well, I believe that because of the current technology, this happen even uncontrolled. Yeah. So, what can control us is our iman, really. Yeah. Not the setting of the online communications, and also the Employment Act states how to complain about sexual harassment at the workplace and the mandatory duty to inquire by the employer on sexual harassment complaints. It also lists down appropriate actions to be taken by the employer if sexual harassment is proven. Unfortunately, this act has a lot of limitations. So, um, well, in in the workplace, if the harasser is the wrongdoer, is our boss, then we have to lodge a report to the boss. So, do you think people want to lodge a report? The one who harass you is your boss. So, how could you make a report about that wrongdoings to the one who harass you, the accused? Of course, you cannot do that. So the complaint procedure is also improved in a way that there are SOP for all the government officials to make a complaint, which is not necessarily the complaint is made um, to the employee, to the employer. Okay, so next one is the Code of Practice on the Prevention and Eradication of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. Okay, before I continue a bit more, I just want to remind you that the Islamic law perspective and the Malaysian law perspective on sexual misconduct and harassment so far is harmonious. So it is not something unintegrated. When we talk about sexual harassment in Islam and the sexual harassment that is defined, explained, expressed in our law currently is harmonious with hukum syara. Okay, so to understand how Islamic law perspective express and tell us about this is how we understand what Malaysian law says. In 1999, go back a bit, the Ministry of Human Resources introduced the Code of Practices on the Prevention and Eradication of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. So ini adalah kod amalan. This is not law. Yeah, this is internal regulation for the Ministry of Human Resources to ask the agencies to implement this code sebab tak ada undang-undang kan. So the best is, even though we do not have the law, we have the code of practice ataupun code amalan. So, well, when we do not have the law, no one will be prosecuted. No one will be punished because we don't have the law. But at least this sexual harassment in the workplace could be reduced. Why? Because we have this code for us to follow. This is to encourage employers to adopt the code of practice against sexual harassment and an internal mechanism to prevent sexual harassment at the workplace. Yeah, internal mechanism means it has nothing to do with other agencies. The staff from this agency committed wrongdoings to another staff, for example, or to a student, then the code of practice employed by that agency, by that organization, may do some what you call punishment element, yeah, tata tertib or that kind of things, but it will not involve court and authorities. The code served as a practical guidelines to companies or to organizations or to agencies to set up their own mechanism to handle sexual harassment at workplace. Unfortunately, the code of practice is not effective. Why it is not effective? Because it is not compulsory for all companies to take it. Yeah, so only 4% of the whole numbers of companies in this country employ this code of practice in their company. Only 4%. Can you imagine? 96% is just reject it. Why? What is the purpose of rejecting it? Because it will never bankrupt you, your company, from applying this code of practice. But maybe it's not popular. People just don't like it. It is not effective as it is just a mere guidelines and the companies are not mandatory to set up the mechanism. Yeah, again, it is a voluntary acceptance of company whether they want to employ it or not. And in 2018, the Public Service Department issued a circular, a more comprehensive guidelines for handling sexual harassment in the workplace for the civil servants in the country. And this is what we call as Garis Panduan Mengendalikan Gangguan Seksual di Tempat Kerja dalam Pekerjaan Awam. Then again, the limitation is that this is only employed for pekerjaan awam. It is not extended to private sectors. I do believe that in private sector, it is even more in numbers and also even more complicated and even more discriminating for women. Yeah. And next one is, all right. So why it is so small? Okay, so now we understand the punishment in Malaysian law as we discussed earlier according to the penal code. Now the punishment according to Islam. Yeah, so it's a bit different because the spirit of punishment according to Islamic law and according to Malaysian law is different. So for Islamic law context, for sexual harassment, it provides for punishment for perpetrators of sexual harassment in the form of takzir. Have you heard this? Takzir? Or yang you biasa dengar hudud? Ya, takzir tak dengar kan? Nampak ke tak tu? Okay, so hudud is fixed punishment stated in the Quran that you cannot change. Yeah, but there are a bit of changes done by our Khulafa Rashidin previously because they consider the situation at that time. Yeah, but basically hudud will not be changed. So for adultery and fornication, a sexual misconduct, the punishment is rejam 100 kali if the wrongdoer is an unmarried person, belum berkahwin. Okay, so if the wrongdoer or the accused is a married person, the punishment will be rejam sampai mati. Okay, then this is hudud. It is well stated in the Quran. It's not depend on how Malaysian judges decide. No, it's already stated in the Quran. Also for the offense of theft, mencuri, what is the punishment? In the Quran is potong tangan. Dia tak kata boleh ke kalau nak potong kelingking je. No, dia potong tangan. Jadi in that sense, that is a definition of hudud that I want you to understand. But sexual harassment is not under the category of hudud. Yeah, it's not under the category of hudud that the punishment is fixed in the Quran. No, it is a ta'zir, iaitu punishment which is not stated in the Quran. We call it ta'zir. Yeah, ta'zir such as death penalty. It could be also a death penalty. It could be caning, whipping, or sebatan. It could be imprisonment, exile, kita buang negeri, or cross, exhortation, stern warning, excommunication or separation. It can be also boycotting. It can be also shaming. Tak puasa bulan Ramadan kena tangkap di siang hari kan. So what is the punishment untuk orang yang tak puasa di siang hari bulan Ramadan? Shaming. Dia akan naik van jenazah, diarak di seluruh bandar. So itu salah satu hukuman ta'zir. So ta'zir is a decree or verdict for an act of sin for which the punishment has not been ascertained, which in this case is different from hudud. That is what I explained just now. So it is not stated whether sexual harassment must be fine, must be caning, or must be imprisonment, and how long will be imprisoned. As stated in the Malaysian law is very clear. But again, because in Malaysia, sexual harassment is governed by Malaysian law, not by Islamic law. So the punishment in Malaysia for sexual harassment so far is, as we discussed earlier, imprisonment or whipping or fine, or could be combination of both punishment. Yeah. So that's all from me. I hope all of you understand what is sexual harassment, what is the context of sexual harassment in the Quran, and also according to the punishment of Islamic law context. And we also understand Malaysian law of sexual harassment, which very much very much harmonious with Islamic law. Okay, and practically the Malaysian law is applicable regarding cases of sexual harassment. Okay, so since we have another 8 minutes, Nur Asifa, so can I leave it to you if we have Q&A session maybe for 8 minutes? Thank you very much.
Can Prof. Thank you, Prof, for the wonderful speech for the webinar. It's so banyak benda yang boleh didapatkan oleh apa yang Prof dah sampaikan. So from the YouTube viewer, ada apa-apa yang nak ditanya? Kalau ada soalan, ada misunderstanding or anything that you want to ask, can ask in the YouTube chat.
Okay, Narasifa, while waiting, I think I want to add one or two more points, because we want to use the time beneficially, if I can say that. We have to change our mind a bit about sexual harassment, in which the victim is always a female party and the wrongdoer is always the male party. Yeah, because men speak less about being harassed sexually by women. They speak less on that. They didn't highlight it. Maybe because they like it. Yeah. Well, the way women dressed, the way women behave, the way women react while communicating with men, for example, invite sexual harassment. That is what we have to understand. But women are very lucky because men didn't take it seriously. But if they take it seriously, I believe that the data will show the report made by male victim is even higher than female victim, because for men they are always sexually harassed by the appearance of women. Yeah, so that is what Islam always remind us as well in the Quran or the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even reminded by our guru, uh, please dress properly, please cover your aura, please make sure that you have limitation in terms of your communication, your socialization, for example. Why? Because we want to make sure that both parties, men and women, can move on according to their context, daily life, without being interfered by all those silly things. So my advice to youngsters, my advice to my female colleagues, please be careful with, do not take it for granted. Yeah, we always see that we are the victim of sexual harassment by men, but anyway, not little. I mean, it's not uncommon at all that sexual harassment even more committed by women unintendedly, yeah, even without force, but they invite it. They invite for sexual harassment conduct from the opposite sex party. So, since we are talking about sexual harassment from Islamic law perspective, so I want to stress that we have so much freedom in our life. We can go to work, we can get involved in the public life, we can get access into public life. We want to do what all men want to do. We want to be at par with men. We want to be empowered. We want to be in the center. We don't want to be marginalized, but be careful that we are still different from men. Yeah, when we are different, there are perspectives that we have to observe, which is not similar than men. The way men look at women is different from what the way women look at men. Yeah, so maybe we have no desire, we have no emotional affection by looking at our colleagues in the office, but we never know how men see this. Yeah, because we are just different. So with that, we have to be more careful the way we communicate, and more careful the way we express ourselves and our personality to the person of different sexual orientation. Yeah, so with that, Nora Sifa, maybe I leave it to you.
Prof,
Yeah,
ada soalan
soalan.
daripada YouTube viewers. Uh,
Okay.
dia tanya, ada tak sexual harassment yang dilakukan oleh suami kepada isteri?
Oh, okay. Sexual harassment oleh suami pada isteri. Tadi saya kata kalau nak menghalalkan sexual desire, we have to get married, kan?
Ya.
Yeah, so macam mana pula kalau dah kahwin ada sexual harassment? Well, we don't call it as sexual harassment. We, there may be a kind of marital rape. Okay, rape itu kalau lelaki merogol wanita yang belum berkahwin, kita sebut rogol. Tapi kalau suami rogol ke isteri dia. Right. So marital rape is a situation which is already also included in the penal code, a situation where the condition of the wife is not is not in a situation where she can commit to a sexual intercourse. For example, baru bersalin 3 hari. You know what I mean? Baru bersalin 3 hari, the condition is still bad, and it will endanger the life of the wife, and yeah, it's a kind of trespass to human beings' body. If even though they are husband and wife, but the situation, I hope you understand, you don't misinterpret it. Ya, bukan I kata suami merogol is, no. What I said is the circumstances of the case, we have to really understand isteri dalam keadaan baru bersalin 3-4 hari, for example. Even though I know that even within a month, the wife is not well. Ya, terutama yang bersalin normal. Walaupun Caesar lagilah susah, not well. So in that situation, katanya kan isteri itu kena bersedia 24 jam even di atas belakang kuda. Ya kan? Bila suami berkehendak kepada isterinya. But Islam juga menekankan soal menjaga maruah isteri. Islam menekankan soal tidak menzalimi isteri. Islam menekankan soal rahmah, kasih sayang, sakinah, tenang dan juga mawaddah, belas kasihan dan kasih sayang dalam rumah tangga. So where is sakinah, mawaddah and rahmah if you choose that way? Yeah, so that is why we have to be very careful about disseminating the idea that suami boleh mendatangi isteri bila-bila masa walau dalam apa jua keadaan pun, because it might be contradict with the spirit of Islam itself. Yeah, and the purpose of marriage is to menjaga kebajikan, menjaga kebaikan dan hubungan untuk kebahagiaan rumah tangga. So yes, so I don't want to say that we do have sexual harassment, but kind of we do have marital rape in marriage. Rasifa, thank you. Faham kan?
Faham. Thank you,
Okay.
Prof. Prof, ada lagi satu.
Okay.
Dia tanya how kita nak react kalau dapat sexual harassment from patient when we work at the hospital.
Ada juga ya, tak padan sakit ya, nak harass doktor ataupun nurse. Well, as usual, prosedur yang sama juga. Kalau di hospital tu dia ada code of practice ataupun garis panduan untuk anti gangguan seksual ni, ikut apa yang ada dalam SOP tu. Dia pelaku ni kita tidak mengira sesiapa pun. Pelaku ni kalau dia pesakit lah pelakunya, kalau dia cleaner lah pelakunya. So the same thing, kita tak perlu alamak itulah nak reportkan, kesian pula dah lah sakit cancer stage 5. So kita pula, that is why you know what, sampai tahun 2022 baru kita ada akta. Adakah kerana kes ini baru timbul tahun 2022? Tidak. Kes ni dah lama, tapi kenapa 2022? Sebab 2022 barulah perjuangan untuk menuntut maruah dan hak seorang wanita daripada dicabuli barulah didengari tahun 2022. Baru terasa well, it's time now to have this Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. Sebelum ni macam tu kan. So why sebelum ni kita agak sendu sebab inilah sebab tak payahlah report, kesian kan. Dia pun ada anak isteri juga, kesian. Ya, ada yang juga kena harass dengan parent, anak hantar taska. Jadi kesian pula nak report bapa budak ni baik kan, nanti malulah anak dia kalau tahu bapa dia harass cikgu dekat taska ataupun you know ada buat perkara-perkara yang tidak senonoh dan sebagainya. So that is how lah. Well, I appreciate kesian, I appreciate kita menjaga maruah orang, but we have to remember we have our own dignity. And then we don't want to normalize this. Kita perlu sedarkan juga pelaku-pelaku kerana mereka mungkin seagama dengan kita, sebangsa dengan kita, mereka juga perlu dihisap di akhirat. Jadi if we don't stop this, kesian juga kat dia kan. Ya, baik kesian kat dia. Kita report sebab kita kesian kat dia. If we don't do this, he will continue doing this. So you know, sampai bila lah dia nak jadi macam ni. So change our mind maybe will help.
Thank you, Prof, for your menjawab soalan ini. So, ada lagi ke soalan atau? Takat ni tak ada dah soalan daripada
Ada ya.
viewer.
Okay.
So I want to thank a big thank to Professor because willing to give talk about this topic yang sangat orang tak aware
Mhm.
kalau adalah sexual harassment sebab macam Prof cakap dia rasa macam this is like just an act yang biasa orang buat dekat orang lain tapi sebenarnya itu adalah sexual harassment kepada terhadap dia.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank to the viewers about joining our webinar for today, and I hope that this webinar could be something to you guys. Um, Prof ada lagi soalan tiba-tiba
Oh
keluar.
ya, okay, okay.
Apa yang perlu dilakukan jika sexual harassment berlaku dan kita tiada bukti yang dapat digunakan untuk melaporkan? So kalau kita tapi kita tak ada bukti untuk buat laporan tu.
Alright, so the SOP is that when we lodge a report, kalau di pejabat-pejabat kerajaan lah atau di agensi-agensi awam, some private agencies as well, including private university, when the report is lodged oleh pengadu, the management will form a what you call a task force committee to investigate, to get all the proof and evidence from, of course, from the victim lah, and maybe other people, the witnesses who can also provide evidence for further investigation. And during this process, which is normally 14 days, proses siasatan 14 hari, normally the management or the task force team will call witnesses and victim and the accused during the 14-day session, on the separate session, of course, and then try to get as much as possible the information that can help us in providing recommendation to the higher authority what they can do. So after 14 days, a report will be finalized and it will be forwarded to the disciplinary board of the organization. The disciplinary board will decide based on the recommendation made by the 14 days committee. So if the recommendation is NFA, no further action, so there will be no further action proceeded. But if the recommendation is that further investigation needed, because it is very clear that there is what you call locus standi. This is all the legal term which is not important to you. Yeah, memang ada case. Okay, there is a locus standi. Please proceed with further investigation. So, a disciplinary board within 60 days, 60 hari, they can further investigate and then decide what is the disciplinary board decision lah, sama ada diberhentikan ataupun digantung, whatever lah. Yeah, so this is what is happening lah. Well, sometimes pengadu tanya apa tindakan yang diambil. Well, tindakan yang diambil tidak perlu kita bagi tahu kepada orang. Yang perlu tahu adalah pelaku saja. Right? So itu sometimes orang kata saya tak nak ngadu lah, kalau mengadu pun diorang tak buat apa-apa. Sebenarnya bila ada satu aduan, tidak ada aduan yang tidak dibuat apa-apa. Cuma apa-apa yang dibuat itu tidak akan dihebahkan, tidak akan dibagi tahu pada semua orang sebab itu sistemnya, itu SOP-nya. Apa saja keputusan hanya pelaku je lah yang tahu. Dan kalau misal kata dia tiba-tiba tak ada dah kerja kat sini, mungkinlah orang akan kata agaknya kena pecat kot, tiba-tiba hilang. Kan, ataupun tiba-tiba mungkin ketua jabatan dia tahulah staff dia tu apa hukuman yang dijatuhkan tu, memang ketua jabatan tahulah, cuma ketua jabatan dengan integriti yang tinggi tidak akan bagi tahu sesiapa. kan? So still pengadu tak akan tahu. So in that sense, jangan kata tak nak mengadu sebab tak ada tindakan. Please. Banyak tindakan. Ya, saya ingat kalau average tu setakat satu kes setiap bulan itu pasti ada. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for all the soalan yang terakhir ni. So, pun dah lebih 10 minit daripada masa yang sepatutnya. Jadi, sebelum kita akhiri, saya nak buat photo session sekejap dengan Prof. Boleh?
Okay. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih Prof.
Terima kasih.